What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Boozer here. Thanks for stopping by. Today's video, we're going to be talking all about the Chimera and how we are expected to deal with this new boss. I did a rundown on all of the forms, listed everything that we could do against it and what it can do against us. And I've come to make a list of some champions that can actually perform probably pretty good against it. So I want to highlight that in this video, bring some attention to some champions that we probably don't even look at, to be honest, in our current content. But I think there's going to be some really big value surges for some of these champions. So hopefully you guys got them in your vault, hanging out. Maybe we can dust them off, train them up, and get them ready for this new boss that's coming up. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. First things first, this spreadsheet looks pretty intimidating. There's a lot of stuff going on. I did manage to put everything into a little bit more digestible format so everyone can kind of know what's going on here. So let's jump into that. All right, so I'm just sharing this little intro graph here that I got from Discord. I think somebody on Reddit made this, so I apologize that I didn't give due credit. I couldn't find the post anywhere. But basically, this just breaks down the bosses into its most simplest form. So you have 4 forms for the fight in the boss. This is going to happen in one fight, all 4 forms. The fight apparently lasts a whole week, and there's multiple things we have to do against them. We have to bring one team that deals with all of these different forms of the boss. So unlike Hydra, is not going to be a 6-man team. It's only going to be a 5-man team, as we saw from the preview video. And this infograph basically just breaks down the most basic parts of each form. So first, the Ram form has stuns, has buff strips, can flips the buffs to debuffs, also plays the unblockable duel. So the duel debuff basically targets one champion that can deal damage to the Ram form, whereas the rest of the team won't be able to do anything or very low or damage reduced. So that's kind of how it works. The Ram form also has some reflect damage, also can ignore defense if you have taunt, veil, or perfect veil. So those are kind of like buffs that you need to avoid or avoid using during this form. So what is it weak against? It's weak against fear. So against fear, the Ram form is weak. So this is something we need to dial in on and potentially bring for this fight, because we need to bring one team that can deal with all 4 of these forms. So next form, we have Viper, A1, a bunch of crowd control stuff, very nasty stuff. A2, heal reduction, hex, and then transfer debuffs to us. And then A3, buff steal, and then poison all enemies. He has a passive, is necrosis passive. Basically, when somebody on your team dies, your whole team gets necrosis, which is like basically damage over time tick. And then can only be removed if you revive revive people. So otherwise that necrosis is always going to be on you. And then he has a passive that block revives for 5-turn cooldown on that. Similar to Lydia, but Lydia is on a much longer cooldown. And then how do we deal with the Viper form? The Viper form can be dealt with block active skills. So never before has a boss been weak to block active skills. But if you can block active skills on the Viper only has the A1 at its disposal. So if the A1 cannot kill you, cannot crowd control you, then you're probably in pretty good shape against the Viper form. So bringing a champion with block active skills is very, very important against the Viper. So moving on to the Lion. The Lion actually is seemingly pretty difficult. The A1 is a single target hit. It's a double hit, but it's a repeatable double hit. And you can see here in the more detailed form I got that it has a 50% chance of landing some pretty hard CC on you. And obviously it has a chance to place an extra hit as well if there are any dead enemies. But the Lion's big attack here is this unblockable decreased defense and weaken on one champion. And then it gets debuff spread to your whole team. And then he attacks everyone with either decreased defense or weaken on him. So this A2 seems really, really strong for the Lion. There is a way to maybe stop the decreased defense and weaken. You can kind of use block debuffs to block it. So I think that might be the way to do it, using block debuff to at least protect your team, but you will lose probably that one champion that he places the unblockable decreased defense and weaken on. But at least your team will be protected. Okay, and then the Lion's A3 attacks one enemy before attacking, removes any kind of decreased attack, crit rate, crit damage. So now the Chimera is like basically jacked up. He will ignore 50% of the target's defense and then ignore additional 10% for each debuff removed by the skill. So up to 80% ignore defense on his A3. Grants an extra turn if he kills somebody. If the target survives, attack all other enemies. Deals damage equal to 50% of the damage inflicted by the initial attack. This attack cannot be critical. So it's just kind of insane, right? He covers both ways. If your guy survives, your whole team takes damage. If your guy dies, then you get an extra turn. So the lion to me seems really nasty. There's no real way to stop him other than it says reflect damage. He takes 5 times more damage from reflect damage and pain link. To be honest, I couldn't find any noticeable champions with pain link other than Carnage. If you guys know of any champions that have the pain link debuff, yeah, let me know. I mean, I think one mythical has it and I think Carnage has it, so I'm not too sure. But the lion form seems really, really tough. And then we get to the ultimate form, which seems actually okay-ish, I think. But yeah, his A1 provoke, A2 gonna be an AoE, gonna be damage inflicted by the skill is equal to 10% of each debuff on the Chimera. Also places increased speed on the Chimera. So actually, the ultimate form can be kind of dealt with decreased speed. So yeah, it's actually kind of interesting. I know for sure decreased speed will work against the lion form. It showed in the video, the preview video, that there was a trial that required the lion to be decreased speed. So I think the decreased speed debuff can work against the every single boss or form here. So that's actually something to consider when you're picking your team champions. But yeah, moving on back to the ultimate form. The ultimate form has this savage evolution. So depending on how many trials you complete, it's going to be doing a bunch of ignore stuff. So the big thing here is that ignore defense 100% when you get to the really high end of the trial count. But you kind of see which buffs have the most value in terms of mitigating damage. So strengthen and shield actually don't wear off until some of the later trial rounds. So strengthen and shield, I think, is you just put heavier emphasis on champions with these ones, these buffs, as opposed to somebody with like unkillable or block damage, which basically gets ignored pretty early in the trial count. Just something to consider here. Ally protection is decent as well, but strengthen and shield definitely a priority for champions if you want to bring in for damage mitigation. All right, so we have now a better outlook of the rundown for this boss encounter. So we know that fears are important. The block active skills are important. Reflect damage could be potentially very important. We don't know exactly how much damage the lion head will actually basically receive from reflect. Usually reflect has been kind of underwhelming in this game, to be honest, but it might be worthwhile to bring something just to test it out. And it seems like decreased speed will work against this boss as well. So now we know what to kind of look for in champions. We also know that the Chimera actually does a lot of things where they try to debuff you. They do a lot of buff stripping, a lot of CC, a lot of nasty stuff. And of course, we know that in the ultimate form, things like block damage, unkillable are not going to be very high value, whereas things like shields and strengthen are going to be very, very high value. And we know that things like taunt, veil, and perfect veil, it's going to be a little bit more nasty against the ram form, which can basically just hammer you if you have those buffs up. So there's a lot of things to consider, but I think I came up with a list of like champions that I think would have really high value for this kind of boss encounter. So maybe we can bring those champions to light and talk about some of those champions. All right, so let's jump right into it. I'm going to start with probably one of the free to play accessible GOAT champions in this game, and it's going to be Lydia from Faction Wars. Completing Faction Wars, you get Lydia. Lydia becomes super relevant again against this fight. She literally brings so much to this fight, and there's a lot that we need to bring to try to deal with the Chimera here. She brings an A1 Fear. So we know that the A1 Fear is really good against the Ram head. The Ram is susceptible to the Fear, which is really good. She brings Strengthen, Increased Speed, which is very strong. Like I said, Strengthen, very good against this boss because it has the most value against the ultimate form. She also brings Block Active Skills, which is really, really good at shutting down the Viper form. Not that many champions have this much stuff going on in their kit that's going to be very good against this Chimera boss. So she also brings Poison Sensitivity, and from the teaser video, there was actually some trials that required placing Poison Sensitivity on the boss. So you know, it's a debuff that not too many champions have, but Lydia brings it in her kit as well. Yeah, incredible kit. I think she's going to be really good against this boss. Definitely one of those champions you lean on, and you're going to look towards building a team around her, I think. Great base stats, obviously. And then, yeah, she's a super old champion, but she's still super relevant and good. And especially, I think this new content, she's going to shine even brighter. So moving on from Lydia, another champion that is actually free-to-play accessible, but obviously still very difficult to get, is actually Ramontu. Ramontu is going to be really good against this fight as well. He brings the, right here, he brings decreased defense, decreased speed. Like I said, decreased speed probably works on the entire boss. Also brings true fear. Again, the ram can be feared, so this can be very, very good against the ram. Also brings the accuracy in all battles. We don't know the stats requirements for a new boss yet, but you never know. Maybe they have really insane resistance, and then we have to bring more accuracy. So Ramontu at least brings the accuracy in all battles. So he's going to be sky high in terms of overall value, I think, for this boss as well. And, you know, he is technically free to play accessible, although very difficult to get. All right, moving on. So another champion that, you know, is kind of free, is basically free, that might have some value in this fight is actually, let's see, Cleoteryx. So Cleoteryx here actually brings a block active skills on a 3-turn cooldown, and she also brings fear. So having two of these debuffs, important debuffs that shut down 2 of the heads right away, on one single champion. She is free. She's a login champion after I don't remember how long, but she is free, and maybe her damage output could be very strong against her, against the new Chimera boss. We don't know, but these having these 2 debuffs on a single champion, single kit is actually very, very nice. She also brings the weaken, and then she also brings increased accuracy as well on herself, making it a little bit easier for her to land her debuffs. All right, enough about the free stuff. Let's go on to the non-free stuff. All right, this champion actually really stuck out to me from Night Revenant by Stophis. By Stophis here doesn't really get a long look a lot of times. He has insane base attack, which is interesting. But his kit actually brings a lot to this fight. So you have the block active skills on an A1. It's 65% chance, it's nothing crazy. But it also has a true fear debuff as well in the same ability on an A1. So that's actually really, really good. Only 3 books needed for this ability. Actually, only 2 books needed if you just want to use them for the debuffs, but only 65% chance and a 50% chance, which is actually not too bad considering it's on an A1. But by Stophis brings them both on 1 skill. He further brings block active skills again on his A2, 3-turn cooldown, sorry. But yeah, he brings multiple instances of block active skills. And to cap it off, he even brings block active skills on his A3. So you got the block active skills covered by this guy. And then accuracy in all battles as well. Definitely going to help out your team if you need more accuracy. So fear, block active skills. He's going to be very, very solid in terms of landing it. He's got it everywhere, all over his kit. I mean, this is a champion that never gets used and now might actually get used. His value definitely jumped up with the inclusion of the Chimera boss. Another champion that I think will have a big value surge for this new boss is the, let's see, Shadowkin? Yes, here he is, Jin Wong. He's actually, you know, he got buffed, right? He got buffed and then he actually became pretty good. But I think he's going to be really, really solid against this new boss. He brings an A1 transfer all debuff from this champion to target, which can actually be pretty good because, like I said, the Chimera has actually a lot of ways to debuff you. So if you can send them back to the Chimera, that's going to be really, really strong. Also brings an A2 here that has block active skills. So that's going to deal with the Viper form, and as well as increasing the duration of all debuffs on all enemies. I mean, it's just a solid A2. It is 3-turn cooldown as well. Then his A3, he does bring a strengthen as well. There's not too many buffs on the boss. That's the thing. There's not too many buffs on the boss, so removing the buffs not so important. But applying the decreased crit damage could actually help, even though some of the bosses can cleanse this off. For example, like the lion head, for example. But a strengthen here is actually not too bad for Jinwan. And his passive is actually really good. He's immune to fear. And provoke. We know that the Chimera boss does place fear and provoke in some situations, and stun, so he's immune to all that passive effect, which is really good. And he helps your team out with the active effect by removing all of that stuff from your team and placing block debuffs. So it's actually, his value in this fight is actually really, really high. So he brings the block active. He brings a transfer debuff, which is really strong. And then he's immune to all this stuff, and he helps your team fight off a bunch of this stuff. Obviously, you want to bring like a cleanser. If you want to build a proper team to this fight, you're probably going to be best to bring a cleanser, just like as a generalist. But Jinwan also is like a generalist, but he also brings the block active skills, which is really, really good. And he brings a strengthen as well. So very, very good kit for this fight. I think he's going to be pretty good. And definitely going to see, I would say he's definitely see some use. Right, moving on, we got from the same faction, Gamoran. Gamoran could actually be useful against this Chimera boss. He actually brings an A1 that actually has block active skills here. It's a 50% chance, but it's a double hit, so it's I think 75% chance of landing. So that's pretty good compared to most A1s. So we got that block active here. Also brings a A3 True Fear and a heal. So a little bit of sustain, and then the True Fear here being placed on a 4-turn cooldown. I mean, previously Gamoran just not used anywhere. Maybe can find a place against the Chimera boss. Also, his passive kind of helps here against the Necrosis debuff. So picking up an ally here could be useful. Just to take off some of the stacks from the Necrosis, saving your team a little bit of damage as well. I could definitely see Gamoran being a little bit more useful. So definitely think about pulling this guy out of the vault. There's not too much that this guy was used for otherwise. All right, so moving on back to the Knight Revenant. We're gonna do a champion that, man, needs some love, needs a place to be good, and it's gonna be Fortis here, the King of Fear. There's no fear but fear itself. Mr. Fortis here. He's packing the A1 Fear. He's packing the A2 Fear. Packing the A3 more damage when feared. And the passive that increases the chances of failing under fear. That's actually pretty good. This is actually a very unique passive. But yeah, so that's going to be really good against the Ram Chimera since he can be feared. And then he also places fear when he dies or when his death is prevented. So yeah, this guy's the King of Fear. So much fear everywhere. So he's going to take care of business against the Ram. But yeah, I mean, right now he's not really used anywhere. But against the Chimera, definitely maybe can see some use. At least maybe like as a damage dealer maybe. And especially since this A3 stacks up damage over time. Gets stronger and stronger. Never know. Maybe it's going to be pretty effective against the boss. All right, I got a couple epics here for you guys. So first, we're going to go into the Barbarian faction. We're going to check out Woad Painted. Woad Painted might be decent against this Chimera boss, right? So A1 block active skills, only a 30% chance, but it's a double hit. Double hit means it's about a 51% chance of landing the block active skills on the A1. And then she also brings a reflect damage here. And then a cleanse, which is really, really nice. And it's actually a team heal as well. Good healer. Also places the reflect damage on all allies. Like I said, we don't know how strong reflect damage is going to be against the Lion Chimera, but having a champion with it doesn't hurt. And she also brings the block active skills as well. She also brings an A3 with the block active skills as well with a 3-turn cooldown. So she's got that head covered, the head of the Viper Chimera. And hey, she's just an epic. So after her, another champion that I noticed that might actually see some value that probably never has any value at all is from the Banner Lords, I believe. Let me check. Nope, gotta be Sacred Order. They all look the same, right? Sorry, back to Banner Lords. Arndal. Arndal, doesn't really get used anywhere, but he might actually have some use against the new boss. So what's he's got here? He's got a chance of placing fear. It's an AoE, places a weaken. I mean, it's not an insane chance or anything. It's only a 50% chance. And he also brings reflect damage on your whole team as well as placing a counterattack on himself. The provoke's not going to be too useful, but the reflect damage on your whole team paired with a fear could actually give him some versatility, especially since he's only an epic. So maybe it could bring some additional value to this guy who right now sees very little play. So you never know, maybe hold off feeding this guy. He might actually be useful for team-wide reflect. We will see. All right, up next, the last champion on the list that I got for you guys here is going to be a Void Lego Ursuga. Ursuga here, Big Mama, pretty much out of the meta for arena and all that stuff, but she's going to be pretty solid against the Chimera. Great base stats, incredible base stats, actually, super fast. She brings the A1 block active skills on a 60% chance, which is pretty good. And then she brings a bunch of kind of like debuffs that keep your team alive. She got the decreased speed, which is really nice against the Chimera. Most likely it will apply to all of the variants. Decreased attack's going to be pretty good, but of course some of them, I think the Lion can cleanse it off. But decreased speed is going to be good. And then she also brings allied protection and strengthen. So like I said, these are two of the bigger or better damage mitigation buffs that you could have, especially against the ultimate version of the Chimera. And then her passive is really good, just a passive allied protection. So she can be a decent solution for maybe keeping your team alive. I think she's going to see a little bit more play in this boss fight, just because she doesn't really see too much play right now. Anyways, folks, that's going to be it for this kind of like short little kind of like theoretical guide on how we can deal with the Chimera, coming pretty soon here. Obviously, you can't just build a team with just block active skills, fear. You definitely need champions that can cleanse. Protection sets are going to be really big, like basically 9-piece protection sets on champions that can place block debuffs. Protected block debuffs will be really, really strong, as we can tell from, you know, the breakdown of each form, that they lay down a lot of debuffs against you. They don't necessarily place buffs on themselves, but they actually do a lot of debuffs against us. So we need to be somewhat protected against those. Having big shields, strengthen, those will probably be the best in terms of damage mitigation coming in. So finding ways to add that to your team is very good. Like I said, cleansing would be very good. Things like decreased speed can probably be very good against the Chimera. Increased speed, probably very good for yourself. Allowing your team to cycle through all their abilities quickly. Our team will be getting feared. So, you know, what do we do about fear? We bring our Chimails. Chimail is probably going to have still very good value against this boss, because we will be getting feared as well. So Chimail is a very easy way to deal with that. Also, we will be getting poisoned like crazy against the Viper form. And how can we deal with the poisons? We can cleanse them off. We can stop them from basically applying to us, so block debuffs. Or we could bring somebody like Stultus. Stultus can send the poison back to the Chimera, dealing damage to itself instead. So this could apply for champions that have abilities that send back debuffs, which could be actually kind of useful, because we'll be getting debuffed a lot. So if you don't have ways to cleanse, block it, maybe send it back, that might be a way to deal with it as well. Lastly, the big thing is, if you can build a team with resistance, resistance would be able to stop a lot of the debuffs coming in, a lot of the hard CCs, basically allowing us to not be controlled. Resistance won't be that easy to build. We don't know what the stats are for the Chimera yet, but I imagine that's going to be pretty high. But a resistance team can be an option. Decrease accuracy on the boss, maybe can lower the resistance threshold we need for our own squad. That could be an option too. But yeah, just some brainstorming ideas here, some champions I've highlighted. Hopefully these champions, you know, obviously have some value, some of them, but some of them don't see much play, and maybe they will after the boss gets introduced. Anyways, guys, thanks a lot for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this kind of brainstorming, theory crafting video. Let me know in the comments below if you guys have any cool ideas on how to tackle this boss. There's a lot to unpack. Obviously, playtesting needs to be done. And yeah, I'm looking forward to bringing you guys ways to deal with this content. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching again. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you guys in the next video.